Sydney. I want to cross to the other side of the country now and catch up with the former West Australian Premier, Colin Barnett, who joins us live from Perth. Thanks for joining us, Colin. There are a lot of people who are very optimistic about the National Cabinet when it was set up. Certainly I was one of them. It seemed like a pragmatic response to a national emergency. But, gee, we're seeing some acrimony between the states now. Each state seems to be fighting for its own interests above the national response. Has Federation, have we taken a step backwards when it comes to federal cooperation during this pandemic rather than a step forwards?
Well, Chris, I think the first point I'd make is that the National Cabinet is not a cabinet. If anything, it's a cabinet without a parliament. So all it is a meeting of the Prime Minister and the Premiers by some audio-visual method. It's no cabinet, and it's not even what the old COAG system was. It's something that is also just on that one topic, COVID, both the health aspects of it and the economic aspects. And I think the original idea was probably quite good. I wouldn't have abandoned COAG, though COAG wasn't always that effective. But for its purpose, it started well. There was a lot of goodwill, a lot of optimism, as you say. But it's pretty well run its course now, and it has unfortunately degenerated into just bickering between the states and between the Commonwealth and the states. So I don't think COVID hopefully won't go on much longer, but I think National Cabinet has got a limited use from now on.
Has it actually weakened the Prime Minister's hand? Because instead of running a national strategy, he has been forced to basically accept different strategies in different states.
Well, I think it's very close to the situation now where the states are actually running the whole COVID exercise. And I think what Scott Morrison and Prime Ministers of both persuasions before him forget is that the Commonwealth doesn't run the states. I mean, it goes back to the Australian Constitution, and people just perhaps need to remember that it was the now states that created the Commonwealth government. And Prime Ministers seem to assume that they can simply tell the states what to do. Now, in some cases, Scott's probably been correct. In other cases, he's been incorrect. And I think that's probably generated to the decline. And you've seen some really quite petty rivalry. I mean, I think it was fairly small-minded of Australian states not to even entertain helping New South Wales and Sydney in particular with vaccines during this period when it's pretty quiet in the other states.
Especially when New South Wales has shouldered the lion's share of bringing Australians back to then go to the other states.
Yeah, look, I think Australians look after each other, and I would agree with that, Chris. And I think there's other areas. If I look back a little bit over it, I'm sure many people would agree, we haven't done a good job in bringing Australians back to Australia, and we haven't done a good job in providing safe and secure and effective quarantine facilities. And we spent too much time boasting about how well Australia was doing, not necessarily taking the precautions. And, you know, right on our doorstep, we've got, 1,000 deaths a day or so in Indonesia, just off our coastline. So we are vulnerable. And I just hope a bit of that goodwill can be restored and states help each other instead of calling each other names and behaving, very poorly.
Yes, indeed. I just want to show a clip of Prime Minister Scott Morrison, who addressed this general topic at his press conference today.
I know National Cabinet's had its critics and its baggers, but I tell you what, the fact we meet every week and we work over this, and then we make the changes, and then we adapt and we listen to each other, and then we fine-tune our programs, that has been enormously valuable.
Yeah, that's one way to put it, Colin. But then we had a situation earlier this week where Victoria closed off border bubble communities in southern New South Wales, and Daniel Andrews didn't even give Gladys Berejiklian the courtesy of a phone call. So it's not actually being as cooperative as he suggests.
No, but I take Scott Morrison's point. It is important in a crisis, and this is a crisis, that premiers and prime ministers should be talking to each other regularly. But it is only on that one topic. It doesn't deal with the wider issues of how a federation can work effectively.
Just finally then on your own state, you'll be wary of criticising a former, a successor from the other side of politics. But has Mark McGowan gone too far in the way he's locked out the rest of the country and just basically isolated Western Australia?
I can answer that in two ways. I think in this, and I've heard many commentators say, we're one country, and I think you all said that sort of comment, Chris, one Australia. Well, we are, but there are significant differences across this country. And for Western Australia to have used lockdowns is popular. and it has been effective for the simple reason there's only 3 ways you can get into Western Australia. The same doesn't apply along those long populated borders, New South Wales, Victoria and even Queensland. So I think we've got to recognise that one policy can be easy to do, doesn't cause major disruption, perhaps in a case like Western Australia or maybe Tasmania. Not so in the bigger population centres. I think Mark McGowan's probably been a little bit hard to act. And when there's only been, sort of one case in Western Australia, I don't think a lockdown was warranted then. But I do say that while this seems to be out of control as it is in Sydney, some sort of lockdown does need to be in place to contain it so that the health professionals and services can get on top of it. Hopefully it won't be long in Sydney and perhaps it doesn't need to be as harsh, but that works obviously until, as all the doctors tell us, until the rate of vaccination is high and widespread across the country, and that's still probably 6 months at least away.
Great to talk to you, Colin. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Chris.